Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
I'm now joined on the line by Tim Ayling from Thales. Tim, good morning and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Tim, we will be discussing a recent report which highlights that bot-generated traffic has surpassed human activity for the first time. But before we discuss that, tell us about your own background.
Sure. So I've been in cybersecurity for 27 years, worked for various software vendors. When I started all those years ago, there was kind of a few viruses, and that was about it. And there was a concern that organised crime would kind of take over, and people kind of scoffed back then. But it's kind of what's happened, and it's a very serious threat now.
So, what is Thales, and what services does it provide?
Well, Thales is a cybersecurity company. We specialise in data security and application security. So we specialise in providing products that prevent hacking and so on using application-led issues, as well as protecting data at the back end. And also we have services around that as well.
Now, we've all witnessed the rise in popularity of bots and ChatGPT, and while they are very advantageous for many businesses, does their increased usage pose any threat from a security perspective?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the first time, because we do this report every year, and I think this is the 12th year that we've done it. And this is the first time that non-human activity has taken over from human activity. And it's close, so it's 51% to 49%, but the trend is obviously in that direction. Now, you rightly say, and often people forget this, is that a lot of that traffic, automated traffic, is actually good. We want some of that traffic. So, for example, during COVID, the World Health Organization set up a bot for WhatsApp, and it was enabling freedom of information to influence, to let people know what was coming in terms of COVID and the latest variants and so on. So it can be very, very useful. The problem is, roughly speaking, around 2/3 of bots is bad. It's kind of attacking people, or from you and me in our daily lives. For example, the Oasis concerts last year, well this year, but the tickets went on sale last year, were kind of hijacked by bots. So who used bots were successful in getting tickets, and those who didn't were less so. So it can really influence our daily lives as consumers.
And how are tools like ChatGPT being used to facilitate cyber attacks?
Well, this is a kind of a two-pronged problem, actually. So I mentioned earlier, when I first started out, there were a lot of viruses. That was kind of what happened. Now, what happened back then was that during the school holidays, there were always a spike in viruses because the kids would be bored, they knew how to write viruses, and so did it during the holidays. And I think we're going to see the same thing now, because with artificial intelligence, you don't really need to have much technical knowledge. You can use ChatGPT to build yourself a bot, and you can let that go. Now, those ones will probably not be particularly harmful or difficult to stop, but there will be a larger volume because they're easy to do. What the real challenge is for organisations and vendors like ourselves is kind of the bots that use artificial intelligence to learn why they don't work. Because if a bot doesn't work, then it's a bit pointless having it. But now with AI, they can kind of teach themselves how to improve and how to escape the mechanisms that are stopping them working. And that's probably a bigger problem. And we're seeing a lot of that, and that's growing.
And how does an AI-enabled cyber attack differ from previous iterations of cyber attacks?
Well, kind of right now, pre-AI, let's say, cyber attacks were typically written, and there were tools that made it a little easier. But they were quite, I wouldn't say predictable is the word, but they were relatively easy to detect. Often a simple signature would be enough, because the techniques would all be very similar. With artificial intelligence, now that it's able to learn, these bots, they're polymorphic, so they can actually change on the fly. And that makes life a lot harder for vendors like ourselves and organisations to prevent. And that's really the challenge for us moving forward.
And why are malicious bot attacks being favoured over human-enabled attacks?
I think it's just because it's a lot easier to do. So, as I mentioned earlier, you can really ask for a bot, a particular type of bot, and you can ask for ChatGPT to write it for you, and you're done. Very simple. If it's human, then that takes time, and just like everything, people talk about the rise of AI because it's going to automate a lot. Well, that's no different for the bad guys. They want to automate as much as they can as well, and it just gives them more time to do more attacks.
And who is most exposed in this regard?
Well, I mean, typically in the, for many, many years, the financial services industry were the most attacked, but actually that's changed. And we're seeing a slight drop in terms of percentage for the FS, financial services market. We're seeing more and more, and leading the way now is travel. So airlines are being targeted. One of the things that we're seeing quite a lot of is certain airlines allow you to put a hold on flights for 24 hours, and then you can pay. So what's happening is the new flights are being released at low prices. The bots are reserving them but not paying, then trying to sell them on at higher prices, and if they can't manage it, they just let them go again. So it's driving up prices of flights for you and I. I mean, it's also doing the same for things like hotels and so on.
And what about the healthcare sector? That must be seriously exposed as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the problem with the healthcare sector is the value of the data in the back end, because, I heard of a recent attack around cancer patients. Now that, you can imagine the value of the data and the privacy associated with it. So healthcare is certainly an industry that's under attack as well. It's not the most prevalent, but it is certainly one that is under attack.
And what are these large language models like ChatGPT, Gemini and others? What are the companies behind them like OpenAI and Google doing to address this issue?
Well, I mean, that's a slightly different thing. I mean, I think the question is not overly too much. The problem with LLMs, large language models, is that, of course, the quality of the data that comes out is all relevant to the quality of the data that goes in. And so they are also open to attack, because all it takes is for somebody to feed in some negative data or untrue data or nefarious data. That opens up the AI to bad results and so on. So it can actually even shape world views. But I think we're quite early in that stage. So I don't think that it's a problem that's really seriously being addressed yet.
And how have you seen these bad bots, these malicious bots being used across social media channels?
Well, there's a slightly different problem with bots on media, because, when we talk about bad bots, we often talk about the examples I've given around travel and so on. The bots on social media typically are misinformation. So we're seeing a lot, and it's kind of well advertised about Russia and so on, who like to use bots to provide misinformation on X or Twitter, and so on. So it's a slightly different problem. Doesn't mean that it's not there, but that's very difficult for us as a consumer to really tackle. We just need to be aware of it. That's kind of down to the social media companies to tackle themselves.
And what can businesses themselves do to protect themselves from the threat of bot-enabled attacks?
Yeah, so there are solutions out there, and obviously, you're talking to me because we have certain solutions around there. And there's a lot. So there are tools, what we call advanced bot management. So we can provide not only software solutions, but actually people to understand what's going on with these bots in the background. And that's kind of more important the more complex those bots are, because sometimes they do need some kind of human interaction. But it all depends on the size of the organisation. If you're selling services online, then there's a good chance you're going to be a target of these bots. If you're a very, very large organisation, you're likely to be more of a target. But there are, targets that are SMEs, but there are also service providers that specialise in that size of organisation as well.
And what is best practice in that respect?
Well, I'm not sure there is a particular best practice kind of that's published. My recommendation would be to engage with a service provider as early as you possibly can, because companies need to look at what's normal and what's not normal for your website. And the longer you leave that process, the harder it is to actually understand what's good and what's bad.
And are the likes of WordPress websites more exposed than, let's say, hard-coded websites?
I don't think so. I think they're all kind of equally as hackable as others. I don't think that serious hackers really distinguish between the two. The prize is what's done at the back end, because often there's kind of very high value data or high value tickets or high value flights and so on. They're more interested in that than they are at what's at the front end. And using artificial intelligence, they can typically get around that. Where they have problems is when an organisation has a specialist kind of security product that is fighting bots, then that makes life much, much more difficult. And in that situation, it could be that the attacker goes, you know what, these guys are kind of well protected. I'm going to move to a less protected site because it's just going to be easier for me and I'll get more return on my investment.
And of course, with the fact that it's so difficult to get cyber insurance and the cost of it is prohibitive for many businesses, cyber attacks are probably one of the key threats facing all businesses out there today, especially those that are operating solely online.
100%, yeah. And the cyber insurance market is a very interesting one because it looked like that was going to be a very large kind of market and very reasonable for companies to use. But as you say, the threat has become so big that the premiums become much, much bigger. And now it's quite difficult to get a policy that's suitable especially for SMBs.
And finally, Tim, in terms of cybersecurity threats over the coming years, what do you think they might look like?
Well, I do think with artificial intelligence, there's going to be a big shift. And I think the threats are only going to become more and more automated, and there's going to be more and more of them. Now, the reality, of course, is we talk about the bad guys having artificial intelligence and making it very difficult. But, of course, the good guys have artificial intelligence as well. So I think we're going to go and see more and more solutions, and it's going to be AI versus AI. It's going to be, I hate to say it, Terminator, but that seems to be the way that we are heading. It's good AI versus bad AI.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.